When I say the word Bhutan, I know exactly what image just popped into your head.
Oh, definitely.
Right. You are picturing these pristine Himalayan mountains. You're picturing ancient monasteries perched precariously on the edges of these massive cliffs.
Monks in red robes, the prayer flags blowing in the wind.
Yes, exactly. And almost certainly you are thinking about their globally famous guiding national philosophy, gross national happiness.
Which is such a fascinating concept to the rest of the world.
It really is. I mean, it's an incredibly romanticized image. We sort of treat this nation as as a modern day utopia.
Yeah, a place that figured out how to prioritize the human soul
Yeah.
over raw, cold economic output.
Exactly. But what if I told you that hidden inside their actual development data is a massive structural fracture?
And it's a fracture most people have no idea exists.
Right. We have a huge stack of data here today from the United Nations Human Development Report. And the moment you factor the concept of inequality into Bhutan's progress, nearly a third of their modern development simply vanishes.
It is honestly a staggering statistical reality.
It blew my mind when I first saw the chart.
Yeah, I mean, when you apply the inequality adjustment to their 2023 index, exactly 31.5% of their human development score is just wiped off the board. It evaporates.
Poof, gone. And that is the exact paradox we are diving into today.
The growth paradox.
Right. We are going to take that postcard image of Bhutan and subject it to a really rigorous stress test. We're using decades of raw, multidimensional data spanning from 1990 all the way to 2023.
So a good 30-plus years of analysis.
Yeah. We're talking about the Human Development Index, the Gender Inequality Index, and even how their progress is physically taxing the planet. We are essentially charting the anatomy of a rapidly modernizing nation.
Which is, an incredibly complex anatomy to dissect.
Because it's not a straight line, is it?
Not at all. Because what the data from Bhutan gives us is this pristine, isolated microcosm of a much larger global phenomenon.
A sort of laboratory for human development.
Exactly. It shows us the exact mechanics of how a nation attempts to rush into the future, the growing pains of that acceleration, and the hidden debts a society takes on when it builds that future.
So, if you are listening to this and wondering why the statistical nuances of a Himalayan kingdom matter to your morning commute, it's because this is fundamentally a story about the illusion of averages.
The danger of averages, really.
Yes. If you have ever looked at the economic news in your own country, maybe the GDP is breaking records or average wages are supposedly soaring.
But you look around your specific neighborhood and think, well, I don't see that wealth here.
Right. You think, who is actually making that money? If you've ever felt that disconnect, then this deep dive is going to show you the mathematical machinery behind that feeling.
We are going to show you how data can be entirely factually accurate, yet still, hide the truth.
It is the ultimate lesson in why headline numbers are often just the cover of the book, not the story itself.
I like that analogy.
Thanks. But to understand the fracture, we really first have to understand the foundation. We have to look at what Bhutan has achieved on paper over the last 30 years.
Because honestly, it reads like a miracle.
It really does. If we pull up the basic Human Development Index, the HDI, the trajectory is just phenomenal.
And maybe for context, we should quickly define what the HDI actually is.
Oh, yeah, please go for it.
So the HDI is a composite score. It was designed by the UN to push back against the idea that GDP is the only way to measure a country's success.
Because money isn't everything.
Right. It brings in 3 dimensions. 1, are people living long and healthy lives? 2, do they have access to knowledge? And 3, do they have a decent standard of living?
Income, health, education, the big 3.
Exactly. And Bhutan's score on that front has been climbing with incredible consistency.
I have the numbers right here. In 2010, they were sitting at an HDI of 0.593. By 2023, they reached 0.690.
Which places them 131st globally.
Which, might not sound like the top of the podium.
No, but in the context of international development, it means they are officially crossing the threshold from a medium-low human development category into a high development category.
And that's a huge deal, right?
It's massive. That transition is one of the most difficult milestones for any developing nation to cross.
Why is that barrier so hard to break?
Because it usually implies that the foundational infrastructure of a society, the really expensive, difficult things that keep people alive and functioning, are finally solidifying.
Like actual structural change, not just a good year for exports.
Right. And when you break open the 3 pillars of the HDI, you see exactly how they manage this transition. The health data alone is a paradigm shift.
Let's talk about the health data, because I really need you to put this in perspective for me. Looking at the raw numbers here in 1990, the life expectancy at birth in Bhutan was 55.8 years.
Just think about that for a second.
I am. You hit your mid-50s, and statistically you were done.
Yeah,
But by 2023, the life expectancy surged to 72.9 years.
they added 17.1 years to the average human lifespan in just over a single generation.
That is entirely redefining what a human life looks like in that country.
It really is. You have people whose grandparents were subsistence farmers passing away at 55, and now their grandchildren are expecting to live well into their 70s.
It changes everything. It changes how you plan for the future, whether you save money, whether you go to school.
Exactly. Your entire time horizon expands.
Right.
And parsing the data further, women are currently outliving men 74.9 years for women compared to 71.3 years for men in 2023.
Which tracks with global biological trends, right? Women generally live longer.
Yeah, that's pretty consistent worldwide.
But as I was reading through these charts, I noticed a really strange anomaly in the timeline.
The year 2000.
Yes, it wasn't a smooth upward curve. Right around the year 2000, the life expectancy data completely stalls.
It actually dips down.
Yeah, it dips to 61.8 years. What is happening there? Why does a country making such rapid medical progress suddenly hit a wall at the turn of the millennium?
So that dip is a fascinating diagnostic clue.
Okay, lay it on me.
When you look at demographic health data in developing nations, a stagnation that is subsequently followed by a rapid, sustained surge almost always points to a systemic public health intervention hitting a logistical ceiling.
A logistical ceiling, like they ran out of supplies.
More like they ran out of accessible territory. To understand this, you have to remember the physical geography of Bhutan.
Right, it is entirely mountainous. It's essentially vertical terrain.
Exactly. It is incredibly rugged, highly rural, and historically very difficult to traverse. So in the late 90s, the government was likely attempting to scale up national health infrastructure.
We're talking about what? Cold chain vaccine rollouts?
Mhm.
Establishing rural clinics?
Yeah, deploying maternal care teams, basic antibiotics, all of that. But they hit the friction of their own geography.
Ah, I see. So the easy gains had already been made in the capital city.
Right. Thimphu and the more accessible urban centers, they got the vaccines, the life expectancy shot up.
But getting a reliable supply of antibiotics or trained medical professionals into a remote valley at 10,000 feet of elevation?
That requires a totally different level of infrastructure.
Yeah.
You can't just drive a truck up there if there's no road.
So the dip in 2000 suggests a bottleneck.
Precisely. They had reached the limit of what their existing roads and supply chains could handle,
But the chart immediately shoots back up after that, like almost immediately.
which proves they broke the bottleneck.
They actually built the roads.
The rapid recovery post-2000 indicates that the government didn't just accept that geographical limit. They pushed the infrastructure through the mountains.
Wow.
The systemic interventions finally penetrated those hard-to-reach areas, and the health outcomes deployed across that rugged terrain.
And it seems like they were funding this push with an absolute economic explosion.
Oh, the wealth generation is staggering.
It's just as aggressive as the health gains. If we look at gross national income GNI per capita, and we adjust it for 2021 purchasing power parity so we can compare apples to apples.
Right, to adjust for inflation and living costs.
Exactly. So in 1990, it was $3,360. By 2023, that number had skyrocketed to $13,842.
That is more than a 300% increase.
It's a quadrupling of the national wealth per person.
It's wild.
And what really caught my eye here was their economic resilience, specifically regarding the pandemic.
Yeah, because tourism is a massive economic engine for Bhutan.
Right. And in 2020, that engine completely shut down globally. And their GNI does drop sharply from over $13,300 down to $12,182.
Which you would expect.
But they didn't spiral. That's the crazy part. By 2023, they absorbed the shock, recovered the losses, and actually surpassed their pre-pandemic peak.
It points to a really robust macroeconomic framework. They aren't just riding a fragile bubble based purely on tourists.
Right, the underlying economic structure has real durability.
And what is most encouraging is what they're apparently doing with that durability. The third pillar of the HDI is education.
Oh, this part of the data is amazing.
It is. This is where you see a society actively trying to rewrite its own future.
Let's get into the numbers. The expected years of schooling for young people essentially doubled.
Yeah.
A child entering the school system in 1990 was expected to get about 5.5 years of education. That's dropping out before middle school.
Barely getting basic literacy, really.
Right. But a child starting school in 2023 is expected to stay in the system for 13.15 years.
They are moving an entire demographic from basic primary literacy to graduating high school and entering tertiary education.
That completely changes the skill profile of the national workforce. You go from manual labor to, a service and knowledge economy.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's synthesize this first layer of data before we drop the hammer.
Good idea.
You have a 17-year jump in life expectancy, a 300% income boost, and a doubling of the time kids spend in school, all happening essentially simultaneously.
This is a country hitting fast forward on modernization.
Right. It's an industrial revolution on steroids.
And that is the true value of looking at the HDI. It proves that Bhutan's growth wasn't a hollow economic boom.
What do you mean by hollow?
Well, we've seen countries where the GDP skyrockets because of, say, oil or mineral extraction.
Right. They strike oil and suddenly the country is rich.
Exactly. But the wealth is entirely hoarded by a ruling class. Or it sits in a sovereign wealth fund while the general population starves.
It doesn't actually reach the people.
But Bhutan's HDI shows multidimensional resonance. The wealth was translated into public goods. It became the clinics that extended life and the classrooms that extended education.
And here's the big transition. The data also provides our first major warning sign.
Yeah.
When we were prepping for this deep dive, you pointed out a massive, glaring crack in that education data.
I did. It's a very revealing crack. So the UN uses two different metrics to evaluate education within the HDI.
Okay.
The first is expected years of schooling, which we just discussed. That's the 13.15 years for the children entering the system today.
Right, the optimistic projection.
Exactly. But the second metric is mean years of schooling, which measures the adult population, specifically everyone aged 25 and older.
So the people who are actually running the country today, the workforce, the parents, the local leaders.
Exactly. And the mean years of schooling for adults in Bhutan in 2023 is a mere 5.8 years.
5.8 years. That is a staggering gap.
It's massive.
The kids are getting 13 years, but the adults who are raising them, on average, have less than 6 years of formal education.
It is a profound demographic friction.
Right.
Just picture it. You have a younger generation being primed to operate in a modern, digital, interconnected global economy.
Yeah.
And they're being raised by and entering a workforce managed by a generation that, on average, barely finished primary school.
That has to create immense social tension. I mean, imagine being a 20-year-old returning to your village with a university degree, trying to explain modern economic theory or agricultural science to local leaders who have a fifth-grade education.
It's a recipe for a severe generational disconnect.
But more importantly, from a data perspective, that 5.8-year figure is the loose thread that unravels the entire average success story.
Right, because if the adults only have 5.8 years of schooling, it means the education revolution wasn't for everyone.
And that brings us to the core of this entire analysis, how this new wealth, health, and education is actually distributed.
This is where the mathematical reality crashes head-on into the philosophy of gross national happiness.
So let's bring back that massive statistic I opened the show with. Bhutan's standard HDI for 2023 is 0.690.
Right.
But the UN also calculates the IHDI, the Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index. Walk us through how that mechanism works.
So the standard HDI is an average. It takes the total achievements of a country and divides them by the population.
Like taking the whole pie and dividing it equally.
Exactly. But the IHDI penalizes that score based on how unequally those achievements are actually distributed in reality.
Okay.
If a country had perfect equality, if every single citizen had the exact same income, the exact same lifespan, the exact same education, the HDI and the IHDI would be identical.
There would be zero penalty.
Right. But as inequality grows, the IHDI drops. It shows you the actual lived experience of the average person, rather than a mathematical mean.
And for Bhutan, the IHDI plummets from 0.690 down to 0.478.
It's a harsh correction.
That is an overall loss of 31.5%. Nearly a third of their development progress is erased.
It effectively drags their human development score back to a reality they thought they had outgrown over a decade ago.
I want to give the listener a way to visualize this because percentages can get kind of abstract.
Sure.
Imagine you're looking at a brilliantly lit modern skyscraper from a mile away.
Yeah.
That's the HDI. It looks incredible. It represents a booming, successful city.
Right, it's glowing.
Yeah. But the IHDI is what happens when you actually walk inside the building. You realize that all the electricity, all the heat, and all the luxury is being pumped exclusively into the penthouse suites.
Oh, I see.
Meanwhile, the bottom 30 floors of the building are freezing, they're using candlelight, and the elevators are broken. The building's average brightness looks fantastic from a distance, but the lived experience on the ground floor is miserable.
That is a highly accurate visualization of what the data is telling us. It's a perfect analogy. And the report actually breaks down exactly which floors of that skyscraper are losing power.
Right, where is the inequality coming from?
The 31.5% loss is driven by a triple dimension of inequality.
Let's trace the power loss. First up is income inequality. The data says that accounts for a 28.5% loss within its specific dimension.
Which tells us that the 300% jump in GNI we celebrated earlier is highly concentrated.
It's not trickling down.
Not efficiently. The wealth generated by modern tourism and urban tech sectors in places like Thimphu isn't reaching the rural agricultural sectors in the same way.
Okay, then we have health inequality, which specifically tracks the variance in life expectancy. That claims a 13.1% loss.
So while the national average is 73 years, a significant portion of the population is living much shorter lives, anchoring that inequality drag.
But the true driver of the collapse, the biggest culprit by a massive margin,
Is education.
yeah. Education inequality in Bhutan sits at a staggering 48.2%. Almost half the value is lost to unequal distribution.
This is the data verifying that generational gap we noted earlier.
The adults with 5.8 years versus the kids with 13.
Exactly. An inequality rate of 48.2% proves that massive segments of the population have been entirely bypassed by the country's modernization.
So we are likely talking about the older generations and almost certainly the highly isolated rural populations.
Yes. They are watching the high schools and universities being built in the major towns. They are seeing the GDP numbers go up on the news, but they possess none of that human capital themselves.
Wow.
They are structurally locked out of their own country's future.
And relying on the average HDI allows policymakers to look at the 13 years of expected schooling and say, all well done.
Right. They pat themselves on the back.
But the IHDI screams that the job is only half done. And honestly, as we dig deeper into the poverty metrics, the reality gets incredibly dark.
It does. We really need to talk about the Multidimensional Poverty Index, or the MPI.
Because at first glance, the MPI looks like another win.
It really does. The overall poverty headcount is quite low. Only 9.8% of the population in Bhutan is considered multidimensionally poor.
And the MPI value itself, which measures the intensity of that poverty, is a tiny 0.039. Right, so on a macroeconomic scale, extreme poverty has been largely pushed to the margins. Under 10% is a number many developing nations would envy.
Absolutely.
But the UN report breaks down what is actually driving that remaining 9.8%. What are the specific deprivations that make up their poverty?
And this is where the averages hide the tragedy.
Yeah. The data shows that child mortality contributes a massive 65.4% to the country's poverty index. I need you to reconcile this for me.
It's tough to hear.
How can the national life expectancy be surging towards 74 years, yet the death of children is the single biggest driver of poverty? That feels mathematically impossible.
It feels impossible until you understand the brutal math of severe localized inequality. This is exactly the dark side of averages we were talking about.
Break that down for me.
Okay, if you have a wealthy urban population where modern healthcare is fully accessible, infant mortality is near zero, and people are regularly living into their late 80s.
Right.
That large, healthy population heavily skews the national average upward. They pull the life expectancy up to 73.
The penthouse suites pulling up the average brightness?
Exactly. But the MPI doesn't look at averages. It looks at specific households.
Yeah.
And it is telling us that for the 9.8% of the population that is trapped in severe poverty, their primary defining characteristic, the thing that keeps them categorized as deeply impoverished, is a loss of a child.
Hot ass. So despite all the new wealth, the primary feature of being poor in Bhutan today is literally burying your kids.
Exactly. Because child mortality is weighted incredibly heavily in multidimensional poverty metrics.
As it should be.
Yes. The loss of a child is the ultimate tragic indicator of a fundamental lack of basic human needs. It means a lack of sanitation, a lack of nutrition, a lack of emergency medical care.
So the fact that it drives 65.4% of the MPI?
It implies that in specific, likely highly remote pockets of the Himalayas, the modern health infrastructure simply does not exist.
The bottleneck we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Specific families in specific valleys are facing repeated, devastating health crises. They cannot keep their infants alive. So yes, the country on average lives to 73, but a marginalized 10% of the country is locked in a cycle of grief and extreme poverty.
This is exactly why we can't just read the headline, Bhutan life expectancy up 17 years, and move on.
You have to look at the distribution.
Because that celebration hasn't reached those valleys. It's an incredibly sobering reality check on the concept of gross national happiness.
It really is.
But the inequality in Bhutan isn't just geographical, between the urban capital and the remote mountains. The data provides a very sharp, very conflicting picture of how this modernization has impacted the divide between men and women.
It's a profound contradiction. The data here offers a fascinating study in the difference between biological survival and societal power.
Let's explore that, the gender paradox.
Mm,
Because the numbers here are pulling in entirely opposite directions.
they really are.
On one hand, you have massive, inspiring triumphs. If we look at the Gender Development Index, or GDI, which measures the gender gap in basic human development achievements, a score of 1.0 means perfect parity.
Right.
Bhutan is sitting at 0.958. They are incredibly close to absolute parity on paper.
And the data clearly shows where that parity is coming from.
Eh.
Look back at the education metrics we talked about.
Yeah.
Astonishingly, women in Bhutan now possess a higher expected years of schooling than men.
I saw that in the notes.
Yeah.
In 2023, the expected years of schooling for females is 13.69 years. For males, it is 12.63 years.
So young women are expected to stay in the education system a full year longer than their male peers.
That is a massive demographic and cultural shift.
Huge. And it pairs with an absolute epic victory in public health, specifically regarding the maternal mortality ratio, or MMR.
Just to define that for everyone listening, the MMR is the number of mothers who die due to pregnancy or childbirth-related complications per 100,000 live births.
Correct. And in 1990, Bhutan's MMR was a terrifying 603.6.
Over
For
600.
every 100,000 babies born, over 600 women died.
Let's pause on that because the sheer terror of that statistic is hard to fully grasp. That means every time a woman in Bhutan got pregnant in 1990, she was taking a massive statistical gamble with her life.
Giving birth was a highly lethal endeavor.
But the data tracks this year by year, and the progress is breathtaking.
It was one of the best trend lines in the report.
From 603 in 1990, it drops to 304 by the year 2000. They cut maternal deaths in half in 10 years.
And they kept going.
By 2010, it was down to 116, and by 2023, the MMR sits at just 59.9.
It is a vertical drop on the chart. That is a greater than 90% reduction in maternal deaths.
That's incredible.
Considering the mountainous terrain we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine the logistical nightmare of getting a hemorrhaging mother from a remote village to a surgical unit in those mountains.
Almost impossible.
Right. So achieving a 90% drop is unarguably one of the greatest public health victories in the country's history.
Yeah.
It skyrocketed their gender inequality index, ranking up to 73rd globally.
They stopped women from dying in childbirth, and they sent their daughters to school longer than their sons.
They did.
But there's always a but when you dig into the socioeconomic layers.
There is.
Despite surviving childbirth at unprecedented rates, and despite leading the country in educational expectations, the data shows that these healthy, highly educated women hit an absolute brick wall the second they try to enter society as leaders or earners.
That's what sociologists call the empowerment wall.
I am looking at the political and economic data here, and it is incredibly frustrating. Women hold only 15.5% of the parliament seats in Bhutan. Men hold 84.5%. That is an overwhelming systemic monopoly on political power.
And that monopoly extends directly into the labor market. The female labor force participation rate is stuck at 56.8%.
Well, the men are at what?
Meanwhile, the male labor force participation rate is 72.4%.
So women are staying in school a year longer than men, but far fewer of them are actually entering the workforce, and almost none of them are making the laws of the land.
It's a stark contrast.
What is happening here? Where does that extra year of education go? Do they graduate high school or university, get their diplomas, and then just go home? Are they legally barred from these roles?
No, it's not a legal barring. There are no laws saying women can't work or run for office. What we are looking at here raises perhaps the most important concept in modern sociology.
Okay.
It's the critical difference between capacity and agency.
Capacity and agency. Unpack that for us. What is the difference?
Think of it like a high-performance sports car.
Okay, I'm with you.
Building the engine, filling the tires, and tuning the aerodynamics that is building capacity. In human terms, capacity is your health, your education, your raw skills.
Okay, that makes sense.
Bhutan has done a globally recognized phenomenal job at building the capacity of its female citizens. They have achieved the biological equality of surviving childbirth and the intellectual equality of nearly 14 years of schooling.
The car is built and it is fast.
Exactly. But agency is whether or not you actually have the keys to drive that car.
Oh, wow.
Agency is your ability to use your capacity in the real world. It dictates who will hire you, who will vote for you, and whose voice carries weight in a room.
So the government built the capacity, but society hasn't granted the agency.
Exactly. Cultural barriers, structural patriarchy, traditional expectations around caregiving, these are the invisible forces preventing the realization of that agency.
Right.
Bhutan is in a classic, highly volatile transition phase. They have successfully conquered basic biological and educational equality, but they have not yet dismantled the structural power inequality.
The glass ceiling is fully intact.
And it is constructed almost entirely out of traditional gender roles.
That feels like an incredibly dangerous social dynamic to engineer.
It is.
I mean, you are educating a massive generation of women to understand modern economics, political science, literature, and global history, and then you are telling them they aren't allowed in the boardroom or the parliament.
You are actively creating a highly educated, highly frustrated demographic.
It is an entirely unsustainable tension.
Eventually, that built-up capacity will force the issue of agency. Those highly educated women will demand the seats in parliament. They will demand equity in the labor force.
But currently, the 2023 data shows they are still locked out of the room where it happens.
Unfortunately, yes.
And as if a 31.5% inequality penalty and a massive structural gender barrier weren't enough to complicate the gross national happiness narrative.
We have one more layer.
We have to look at the physical, literal toll this modernization is taking on the Earth.
The environmental cost.
Because all those new universities, the clinics that dropped the maternal mortality rate, the infrastructure that raised the GNI, none of that magically appears. It is physically built out of the Earth.
And this is where we introduce the final dimension of our data. The PHDI, or the Planetary Pressures Adjusted Human Development Index.
I actually love that the UN calculates this now. It's a relatively new metric, right?
It is, yeah.
It essentially acts as an ecological audit. It asks, okay, your human development score is high, but are you destroying the planet to achieve it?
Exactly. It holds countries accountable for their footprint.
And for Bhutan, when carbon emissions and material footprints are factored in, their HDI takes another massive hit.
It drops by 15.0%.
Falling from 0.690 down to 0.593.
So if you stack the penalties.
Right. The 31.5% loss to inequality and the 15% loss to planetary pressures, the original celebrated HDI, is taking an absolute beating.
Let's examine the specific environmental pressures causing that 15% drop, because the velocity of the change is what's really alarming here.
Okay, let's look at the numbers. First, we look at emissions.
Right.
Per capita CO2 emissions in Bhutan went from 0.33 tons in 1990 to 2.17 tons in 2023.
And then there's the material footprint.
Let's define the material footprint clearly, because it's different from carbon.
Yeah, this isn't just carbon in the air. This is the raw physical weight of biomass, fossil fuels, metal ores, and non-metallic minerals that are extracted from the earth to meet the consumption demands of a country.
It's the physical stuff.
Exactly. The rock, the sand, the timber.
And Bhutan's material footprint climbed violently. In 1990, it was 5.45 tons per person. By 2023, it is an astonishing 24.67 tons per person.
It nearly quintupled in 30 years.
It is a massive surge in physical extraction.
It is.
Okay, I have to step in and push back here, or at least I want to play devil's advocate on behalf of Bhutan for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
We are sitting here in the West, recording this with equipment made of rare earth metals, in a studio powered by a grid with massive historical emissions.
Very true.
The average U.S. carbon footprint is somewhere around 14 or 15 tons per person. Bhutan is at 2.17.
Right.
Is it really fair for the international community to slap a 15% penalty on a developing nation in the Himalayas? I mean, from an ethical standpoint, if my wife is going into complicated labor in a remote mountain village, I don't care about the material footprint of the asphalt.
You just want to get her to a doctor.
Exactly. I want a paved road, and I want a concrete hospital, and I want an ambulance burning fossil fuels to get her there safely. Don't they have the right to pour concrete to save those mothers' lives?
It is an entirely valid, highly charged question, and we have to approach it with absolute impartiality, looking strictly at what the index is designed to do.
Right. What is the UN actually measuring here?
You are entirely correct that in absolute numbers, Bhutan's carbon and material footprints are a mere fraction of heavily industrialized Western nations.
They aren't the ones causing global warming.
No, they aren't. And the PHDI isn't necessarily a moral judgment saying Bhutan doesn't have the right to develop or build hospitals. It is a mathematical observation of systemic sustainability.
But a 15% drop still feels like a harsh grade for a country just trying to keep its kids alive and get its citizens out of poverty.
I understand that.
Mhm.
But the penalty isn't just about the current absolute number of 2.17 tons of carbon. The penalty is aggressively flagging the trajectory and the speed of the consumption.
The velocity you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. A material footprint jumping from 5 to almost 25 tons in a single generation shows that Bhutan, despite its unique philosophy of gross national happiness, is fundamentally following the exact same unsustainable Western model of modernization.
Ah,
They are trading ecological stability for GDP.
I see. So they haven't actually invented a new harmonious way to develop. They are just using the old industrial playbook. Dig stuff up, burn it, build with it.
Precisely. A material footprint of 24.67 tons per capita means massive aggressive extraction. It means heavy mining, relentless construction, and a surge in material consumption.
And that clashes directly with their national identity.
Extremely.
Yeah.
You have to remember, Bhutan is globally famous for its environmental harmony. Their constitution actually mandates maintaining a minimum of 60% forest cover for all time.
Right.
So for a country whose national identity is deeply intertwined with pristine nature, quintupling their material extraction is quietly eroding the very foundation of their brand.
That is the ultimate tension of this entire deep dive. You want the life expectancy to go up 17 years. You want the maternal mortality to drop 90%. You want the kids in school for 13 years.
But you can't achieve that with just good vibes and pure mountain air.
No. You need physical hospitals, you need ambulances, you need sterile surgical equipment, you need sprawling university campuses, and you need paved roads to connect them all.
And every single one of those things requires carbon and massive material extraction.
It highlights the great unsolved paradox of modern human development.
It does. We have not yet figured out, as a global species, how to decouple human well-being from planetary extraction.
We don't know how to raise the HDI without spiking the PHDI.
Exactly. And Bhutan's data perfectly illustrates that even a country philosophically dedicated to well-being over wealth cannot escape that mathematical trap.
It's unavoidable right now.
Their 15% planetary penalty shows that their current growth model, while successful in the short term, has a hard expiration date.
Which brings us to the final synthesis of all this data. We have thrown a massive amount of percentages, indices, and sociological concepts on the table today.
We covered a lot of ground.
So let's weigh the scales. What is the final verdict on Bhutan's 30-year journey?
Well, on one side of the scale, you undeniably have the volume of progress. 30 years achieved unimaginable quantitative leaps.
A 300% increase in national wealth.
17 additional years of life per average citizen.
And 90% drop in mothers dying in childbirth.
Doubling the years children spend in school. By any historical standard, that is a triumph of governance and policy.
But on the other side of the scale, you have the quality and the distribution of that progress.
The hidden debts.
Right. The data definitively reveals that Bhutan is carrying two massive hidden debts. First, a 31.5% inequality loss that is leaving the rural and older populations behind.
And second, a 15% environmental cost that is accelerating dangerously.
It means their progress is highly fragile.
Very fragile. When almost half of your education value is lost to inequality, that 48.2% metric, your workforce is structurally unstable.
When your multidimensional poverty is driven overwhelmingly by the death of children in isolated areas, your public health victory is fundamentally incomplete.
And when your educated women are locked out of parliament, you are wasting half of your human capital.
So if you are looking at this data as a policymaker, what does the roadmap for Bhutan look like going forward?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because obviously, the policies of the last 30 years work to drag them out of low development and into the high human development category. But the sledgehammer approach of just building more stuff won't fix these nuanced fractures.
No, it won't. What got them here won't get them to the next level. Future policy cannot just aim for raw, generalized growth.
It can't just be about increasing the GNI by another $1,000 or bumping up the average life expectancy by another year.
Exactly. It must be surgical.
Surgical.
Yeah.
What are the specific targets?
They need to specifically target that 48.2% education inequality. That means implementing massive adult education and vocational programs to close the knowledge gap between the 5.8-year adult and the 13-year youth.
Bring the older generation into the modern economy.
Right. They must target the localized child mortality driving the MPI. That means micro-level, highly specific health interventions in the most remote valleys, not just building another state-of-the-art hospital in the capital city.
Reaching the 10% that are left behind.
Exactly. And crucially, they have to actively dismantle the glass ceiling. The 15.5% parliament representation is a glaring failure. They have to transition their women from merely having capacity to actively wielding agency.
It is a fascinating data set because it completely reframes how we think about happiness and development.
It really challenges our assumptions.
Looking closely at Bhutan proves that development isn't a destination. It's not a finish line where you cross into the high HGI category, pop some champagne, and announce, well, we did it. Everyone is officially happy now.
It is a constantly shifting, highly volatile equation.
Every solution inevitably creates a new problem. You build schools, you create a generational divide.
You build hospitals and roads, you spike your material footprint.
True development isn't about solving everything once and for all. It is the continuous, vigilant management of those secondary crises.
I couldn't agree more.
And, honestly, if a country as philosophically dedicated to gross national happiness as Bhutan still struggles with a 31.5% inequality penalty and a surging, unsustainable material footprint, it begs a much bigger question about us as a species.
It absolutely does.
Think about it. Is it even possible to achieve rapid modernization without leaving a massive segment of your population behind?
Is it possible to build a safe, healthy society without taking a massive loan out against the physical planet?
Or is the very definition of development that we use globally, the expectation of constant upward growth, fundamentally broken? Are we all just chasing a metric that inherently requires inequality and extraction to function?
That is the defining question of the 21st century, and the data suggests we don't have the answer yet.
And it's something I want you, our listener, to seriously think about today. Don't just look at Bhutan as an isolated case study. I highly encourage you to go online, look up your own country's inequality-adjusted HDI.
You might be surprised by what you find.
See how much of your national success might actually be an illusion masking deep structural divides.
The numbers are all out there, public and waiting, if you're willing to look past the comforting averages.
As we wrap up, I want to bring us back to where we started. Remember the idea of looking at economic data like a clean, simple chart where the line just goes up?
Yeah.
Development data isn't a simple chart. It's a funhouse mirror. Depending on where you stand, whether you are a 20-year-old female university student in the capital city or a 50-year-old rural farmer who just lost a child, the reflection of the country's happiness looks entirely different.
We have to continually adjust our perspective and check our blind spots to see the whole picture.
Keep questioning the averages. Until next time, keep diving deep.